dies, don't they come back? Isn't that so? You tried to get into the lobby today, didn't you? Come Back, A Full of Snow by James Turner. It happens every year about Christmas time. I have only to go into a shop to buy my Christmas cards, and there is bound to be one of the boys tobogganing in deep snow. Rather old-fashioned, I suppose, though whether there are fashions in snowfalls I don't know nevertheless. To me, these cards bring it all back. There's generally a farmhouse in the background, an open gate with a robin in his crimson winter coat. Great swags of snow on the hedgerows in the center of the picture. These two boys are flying downhill, waving their hands, their faces like red apples. Of course, it is an idealized sort of Dickensian picture. For one thing, I'm certain the boys careering downhill in the picture would never have had the time to wave. They would have been clinging too tightly to the toboggan. Further, it is an ideal Christmas picture, at least from my part of the country, Cornwall, where we rarely get enough snow to make a snowman, let alone toboggan. There'd only been 1 year since I've lived in Cornwall, when the snow was so thick that I was able actually to go onto the beach in the Bain in my home and make a snowball and throw it into the sea. It was 1963, that very bad winter, and what I did master, I feel, is some sort of record so that these kind of Christmassy pictures are pleasant enough to send to a friend, but scarcely real. Yet what I remember when I see such a card is that it did once happen to me. It did once become very real indeed, and the two boys in that faraway real picture are David, my cousin, and myself, of course. It's not so much the picture of two boys tobogganing that causes me even today to shiver slightly. It is the nature of fear itself. For fear is a very odd thing. I mean it now today. When I'm so much older, I'm not in the least afraid of snow. It's merely a nuisance that has to be cleared away from the front door. It means cold weather, which I can't abide. Yet I'm still afraid of what happened so long ago in that snowfall in East Anglia. But then that Christmas of 1922, when my uncle invited me to spend the holiday at his home near Orford in Suffolk snow, was very much a novelty to me. It's difficult to explain exactly. Most childhood fears are when you look back at them from middle age, but when I remember that fear each year, I can only explain it by saying that something was waiting for me behind the snowstorm, was it? And I've often wondered, because I was 15 and young for my age, was it because snow was so great a novelty to me, whereas to David, who lived all the year in East Anglia, and therefore knew the land well as being used to snow, nothing happened. It really began when I arrived at my uncle's house. I'd gone straight from school instead of going back to Cornwall, since my parents had gone to New York on business. It seemed odd at first to be going to Liverpool Street Station rather than to Paddington. When I left Sussex, the sun was shining, but the sky gradually clouded over, and by the time I had crossed London and the train left Liverpool Street, a light full of snow covered the station roof. I was thrilled if snow did come. In any quantity, this was going to be a Christmas to remember. My uncle's car was waiting for me at Ipswich. I felt very grand being whisked through the town and into the lanes through Woodbridge, and past the lonely farmhouses towards Orford. Although this was Christmas week, no one else but me and the chauffeur seemed to be about in that desolate landscape, until we passed the old and secret wood of Staverton, where St. Edmund is reputed to have been martyred by the Danes. Then a couple of men and a woman emerged from beneath those gnarled and twisted oak and holly trees with great bunches of red berries in their arms. It was a further sign of a good Christmas as the car sped on. I looked back. They were walking in the center of the road after us. I had the uncanny feeling in the warmth of the car that neither of them was real. And then they were gone in the turn of the road so far. However, no snow had fallen here, but the lights from the house, every window seemed to be illuminated, fell on the gravel drive. The lawns were glittering with frost. My aunt, however, knew what was coming. She welcomed me into the hall beside the stuffed bear, with uplifted arms and paws on which lay a silver tray. For visiting cards of first words, gave me hope, Nicky dear. It's lovely to see you. David will be pleased, and I really believe we shall have snow for Christmas Day. You've brought it with you. How clever you are. Now you must come at once and get really warm. You must be frozen. I hardly remembered my uncle's house. It's true I had been in it once before, but that was in summer then. Of course I had run all over the farms, helping as I thought the animals. I'd gone off with David often enough to the sea at Orford and Bordsey, and I knew of the merman who had years ago come out of the sea and stayed a while. It offered itself even rather a pet with the inhabitants. Until one night, it slipped away again across the marshes to the shore. It was said that the fact that the local vicar made him go to church and that he could not bear the long sermons he was forced to listen to any longer decided him to leave. From my own experience of church, I didn't blame him. David and I had also explored the old castle keep and the numerous Martello towers along the coast. What I did remember, however, was that the farmhouse was a tall and impressive Queen Anne house, that it had many rooms from the huge drawing room, the study, the dining room to the bedrooms and attics. The maidservants. You have to remember that this was in the old-fashioned days of 1922, when servants were still kept lived in these attics and went down the back stairs of the kitchen and sculleries, pantries, and dairies. The first time I had been 10 years old. Even so, I was conscious of the warmth and comfort of real wealth. Even if farming was in a bad state, especially in East Anglia, so it was to get even worse. Later, the point was that my uncle did not depend on his farms for his income. That came from his business. Enterprises, I didn't know then what they were a truth to tell. I didn't care, all I knew was that Scarlet's, it was called, with its endless acres, its workmen and farmers, was to me a wonderful playground. And that David was a wonderful companion, making up new adventures each day and telling the most absurd lies each night as we lay in bed in his bedroom on the first floor overlooking the woods. Back into the heart of Suffolk this evening, 4 nights before Christmas, 1922. What I remembered of the house was quite changed. The interior was alight with welcome, whatever was to happen outside in the house. There was safety and gaiety. The staircase was festooned with branches of green, holly and ivy paper chains, and Chinese lanterns alternated with bunches of mistletoe. And the sideboard groaned under the weight of fruit and nuts. Furthermore, the house seemed full of servants. It didn't take much intelligence to sense all the other good things. Plum puddings, mince pies, York hams, the Mrs. Horsley, the cook, out of her sleeve for Christmas Day itself. While I was warming myself before the huge log fire in the drawing room, my uncle came in. It was a short man, thick-set, rather Dickensian. He was smoking a cigar, and his first remark was what I should have expected of him. He always spoke in a ponderous manner, weighing his words as if everything he said was of the utmost importance. Now, of course, when I look back at him, it's easy to see him at the head of a boardroom table, or deciding the fate of the companies and his command. But then, he was a person I should not have cared to cross, after I had stood up and thanked him for asking me to come to stay. He shook hands with me in a formal manner and went on. I regret, Nicholas, he would never have dreamed of calling me Nicky. I regret very much the holly this year has few, I might almost say no. Berries and Christmas, you'll agree, depends largely for its full effect on red holly berries. Actually, I would have thought, and did even then, that it was brandy which really made Christmas for him. Neither did I dare to tell him that I had seen 2 people emerge from Stapleton Forest so near his property. With berried holly in their hands, he might have sacked one of his employees for not knowing the right place to go, and snow. Uncle, I exclaimed, catching sight of my cousin David coming down the stairs. It was snowing a little in London. Surely it'll come this way soon. Your aunt, my uncle said, who knows all about winds and weather, seems to think it will. She's making preparations for it too, and with that, he walked out of the room, and no doubt thinking that he had done all that could be expected of him. Towards a nephew of 15, shut himself in his study. I suppose it was just after 11 that we went to bed. That first night, I was to sleep in David's room. We were hardly undressed when he said excitedly, "You are Nick." I had no idea what he was talking about, but I was not going to show myself a coward in front of him. "Yes, of course. What do you mean? You haven't been here at a Christmas before, have you? Well, we're going to raid the servants and the young ones. At least," he was laughing and rolling up one long football stocking into a ball and thrusting it into the foot of another, making a fairly soft, primitive club. "But you might hurt someone with that?" I said, "Nonsense, Nick." He threw the club across the bed to me. "He'll only give 'em a fright, couldn't hurt them." He smiled in what I thought was a rather nasty manner and brought his warded stocking down with a thump on the bed. "We do this every year," he went on. "What's more, they'll be expecting us, and there's generally some chat from school staying." None of them could come this year, though, and felt his contempt for me as a substitute. He banged the waddy, as he called it, down on the bed again. He laughed once more. "We'll have to be careful. We don't get hurt ourselves, although it seems silly to me." I followed him onto the dark landing. He flashed the torch, ran up the attic stairs silently, and stood outside the second door on the right of the corridor. "We don't have to worry about old Horsley, the cook. She's snoring her head off at the end of the corridor anyway. She never wakes up." He turned to me and whispered, "We burst in and run straight across the room, lashing out with our bodies, and then out again like a whirlwind. Don't waste any time once we're inside." I stood shivering outside the door in pajamas and dressing gown, excited at the adventure and brought up by David's mood as he burst open the door. The light went on far from us, just running across the room, delivering a few well-aimed blows. And out again, we were taken entirely by surprise. The maids were waiting for us, but so great was our impetus that we were amongst the three of them before we could stop the noise of laughter, and David's war whoops must have been terrific. I felt my club wrenched from my hand. I was tripped and fell across the bed. The light suddenly went out, and I felt myself firmly held down. I had no idea what happened to David or what was to happen to me. All I now really remember, because it was the first time it had happened to me, was that when the lights went on again, Emily, one of the housemates, was holding me down and laughing at me. I was vaguely aware of my uncle shouting at us from below to be quiet. I tried to get up from Emily's bed, but I was too firmly held indeed. This was David's era of tactics. He forgot that all the maids had to do was to get hold of our arms, and we would be helpless to wield our weapons. "Oh no, Master Nicholas," Emily was saying, as I heard my uncle roar again. "You've lost the battle, and you'll have to pay like this." I felt her hot lips on mine. She kissed me 3 times before she released me. Sweet, gentle kisses. "Now go," she said, taking away the lovely warmth of her arms, "and happy Christmas to you." I remember I ran out of their bedroom between the other 2 beds, with all of them laughing, my face burning the whole episode. It shows you the kind of escapade that David got up to that hardly taken more than 10 minutes. Nevertheless, even now cannot forget Emily's face that night and the warmth of her kisses. Perhaps I would have forgotten if the snow had not come. And while we're asleep, it did come. No one heard it. No one was kept awake by its coming. But when I looked out of the bedroom window, before dressing to go down for breakfast, there it was, the miracle which had begun. At Liverpool Street Station was now clear to us all. I was caught up in the wonder of it, and hardly heard David collab, "Hurry up, Nick, and get dressed. Father's driving us over to Orlick's farm to get the turkey. And I bet we'll be able to toboggan. It's colossally thick." I did dress quickly, No doubt the smell of bacon and eggs coming up from the dining room would have hurried me. Anyway, I sat down between David and my aunt, and Emily brought me a plate of beautiful breakfast. She was smiling at me as if we shared a secret, I suppose. In a rather schoolboy manner, I had fallen in love with her. The snow was still a wonder when we got into the car, the very suddenness of its coming, as it were, over the fields and woods behind the house. The amazing difference is coming, May. To everything, the joy of living inside a house and being able to run out into a world of icing sugar made its arrival the supreme Christmas present to me. This landscape of gleaming white increased the mysteriousness of the countryside. It did more now that I was actually out in it. It frightened me, for it was while my uncle was interviewing Andrews, his tenant at Alec's farm, and examining the fallen roof of one of the barns, that David and I first got out into this whiteness. I was suddenly lost. I see that now, that this vast, expansive way to torn away the edges of my familiar world, where before I knew my way about now. Everything, the fields, the trees, the church, even the cottages, and my uncle's estate was strange and terrifying. Every landmark changed. David had, of course, already formed one of his mad schemes. The snow didn't frighten him. He saw nothing at all strange in it, only a phenomenon laid on. For his special benefit, only a natural event against which to pity strength. He had the idea of pulling out into the untrodden snow, the top half of the pigsty door, and converting it into a toboggan. I went to help him lift it to where the field began to slope downwards to the valley below. Nothing could have made me tell him of my fears. In fact, I was rather proud that he considered me capable of helping him. The battle we had lost the night before was never mentioned. "You sit in front, Nick," he said, throwing himself in a professional manner, full length at the back. "I'll steer. I'm an expert at it, even as I did what he told me." I recalled how last night, as we stood outside the maid's door, his confidence had led him into error. Our craft, imbued all at once with a life of its own, sprang across the snow silently and with gathering speed. But one crazy moment it turned and twisted like a top until, either under its own weight or David's feet, it righted its course. We shot downhill at what seemed to me a terrific speed. We were alone, cruising on a white sea, a vast opalescent ocean with land before us. In the shape of a gate opening between two ends of a hedge, cold air was tearing into my lungs. My whole body was ecstatic with the cold and the fright of speed. I frantically grasped the iron ring used to open the door when it was in place, in a mad dream of pleasure and terror. I heard David's voice giving the command, as it were, from the bridge. "I'm going to stare through the gate. Don't move, hold on, and keep your feet in the sun." Low over the approaching hedge was burning with one great eye at me. The frail craft that we were adrift upon tore across the snow, and with an immense surge of power drilled its way through the hedge, opening through the massive banks of hedge snow shooting up the far hill, came to a stop. It was then that I felt the pain in my leg and the terror in my mind of the two. The terror was the worst. I bit back a cry. David was already off the wooden door and preparing to drag it back up the hill for a second ride. He looked at me where I was still lying in the snow. "Hey," he said contemptuously. "Get up, Nick. Help me pull this thing to the top again. I'll show you something even better." I was astonished that he could be so calm that he made no reference to what I had seen. But surely he must have seen it too. I can't, David," I said. "I'm afraid I can't. It's my leg. Something happened when we shot through the gate." But one brief moment, I saw the look of anger on his face. And then, either from the sight of so much blood on the snow, or because of the sharpness of the pain, I fainted. I gather because David told me afterwards that I called out to him, "Get help for Emily. She's by the gate." I don't remember being taken back to my uncle's house. David told me the day my uncle and Andrews from the farm carried me to the car, and it turned out that I hadn't broken my leg. After all, there must have been an iron spike on the gate concealed by the snow, and it had ripped a long, deep wound in my calf. As we shot through it, bled profusely, my aunt's doctor came and put in 12 stitches, but when I woke in bed, in one of the guest rooms, not in David's woman protected, it was not the accident to my leg, which worried me. It was what had happened to Emily. She was lying against the hedge as we rushed through a widening pool of blood, issuing from her head and matting her hair. Her eyes were staring as if she were appealing to me for help. She was wearing a thin summer dress. In the short time I saw her, I was not only horrified by her accident, but also by the fact that she was out in this cold weather with no coat on. She must have been walking across the field, though. Why? When she would have had more than her share of work back at the house with everyone so busy, and slipped in some way and hit her head on the same iron projection which had ripped open the calf of my leg. She, like me, would have fainted from loss of blood. But now here in bed, I knew with a certainty I could not deny that Emily was dead. That help did not come in time to save her. I had expected something horrible to happen. I was convinced that this miracle of snow, which had so excited me when I could look at it from the house or the car, was malevolent. The unnaturalness of it to one who was not used to it was frightening it. The snow did not want me out in it. I was uneasy the moment I went into it with David. Unlike him, I was not master of every situation, nor was I able as he was to create situations which I could command. He would never have felt that something was hidden in this all-obscuring white blanket, suffocating, waiting to rush out at him in the same way that an open door at the head of a dark staircase may conceal something ready to spring out at your approach. I can explain it in no other way, but from the second the toboggan began to rush downhill, I saw the features of this threat rushing up to meet me as I was rushing to meet it, and then there was no stopping. And indeed, I had been right, for here I lay in bed when I should have been enjoying the final preparations for Christmas, and Emily was dead. I was too acutely embarrassed of being such a nuisance. I almost wept at the thought that by my ineffectiveness, or stupidity as David would have called it, I was spoiling Christmas for everyone else. I didn't know that my aunt paid me several visits before I came out of the anesthetic, but she was beside me when I did. "Is it very painful, Nicky, dear?" she asked, "because if so, the doctor says that you can have a pill to ease it." "No." "Aren't, Amy?" I was propped up on pillows, and I dare say I looked white, and I put out my hand and touched hers, as if by so doing I could grasp her protection. For this was the whole point of what had happened. The pain in my leg did not matter. I wasn't going to let her think that I couldn't stand it. "But please," I asked, "did they get to Emily in time? Was she still alive?" My aunt smiled. She must have thought that I was still wandering under the effects of the anesthetic. "Emily, dear, there's nothing wrong with Emily. At least I hope not. We depend on her a great deal at a time like this. She's a good girl, but she was there in the snow. I saw her. She'd had an accident. She'd hit her head where dear by the gate just as we rushed through. It was horrible. She was lying there in a pool of blood. Did Uncle manage to save her?" I suppose what I was saying must have sounded melodramatic to my aunt. She smiled again and pulled the sheets up to my chin. "Nicky, you're not to worry about such things. You've been dreaming a nasty dream." "I agree. But when one hurts oneself and loses a lot of blood as you have, and then had an anesthetic, you do have funny dreams." She got up from the bed. "All you have to do is get strong again so that we can have you with us on Christmas Day." "But, Aunt, I did see her, I did, and she was hurt. Well, we can soon prove it was all the dream idea. Besides, weren't you and David up in the maid's room last night? You made a great deal of noise, and I'm not sure that I approve of it at all." I suddenly remembered how Emily had held me. Then the warmth of her arms. Now she was dead. I couldn't hold back my tears. It was obvious that my aunt thought me too weak to be told the truth. "I'll send her up with a cup of cocoa," she said. "That'll do you good." You see, as she shut the door, I don't think I expected to see Emily come in a kind of resuscitated corpse in my still fuddled state. I thought my aunt, too, was playing a macabre joke on me. It must have been 10 minutes later that I heard the knock on the bedroom door. I shrank back into the bed, closed with fear. Emily came in carrying a tray. I must have stared at her in my fright, Master and Nicholas. She laughed. "Whatever's the matter, you look as if you've seen a ghost." She put the tray down beside my bed as I gasped out. "It, really you?" "Emily, of course. It is Master Nicholas here. You take my hand." "You'll soon find out." I did take a hand, warm and strong. She was laughing, as she had laughed the night before there. She said, "I'm flesh and blood, aren't I? But I..." Stammered out, realizing that what my aunt had said was true. It was all a dream. I had not seen Emily in the snow covered with blood. She was very much alive, but nothing she said. "You hurry up and get that leg well again, or Christmas will be spoiled, and hey, let go my hand, I have work to do. You know, can't lie about in bed all day. Like some, I know Emily." I asked Emily, it was last night. David and I played that silly joke, wasn't it? It was very silly, too, since we knew all about it and expected you. And you did kiss me, didn't you? 3 times well. Master Nicholas, that was all. A bit of fun, really, wasn't it? I noticed that she was blushing. Then I begged, leaning towards her. "Kiss me once again. It's important to me." She patted my hand gently. "Whatever next?" She laughed. "Just suppose your aunt was to come in while we're at it, she won't," I said. "And even if she did, I think she'd understand well." She laughed again, knowing nothing of my reasons for asking her to kiss me. "If it will make you better quickly, then here." She leaned over and kissed me as warmly as she had the night before when she had gone. I closed my eyes, so after all, it was only hallucination. What still worried me, however, was the strangeness of the occurrence, and why I should have dreamed that I saw something in the snow that wasn't there. The semblance of Emily dead? Because my life up to then had been completely normal. I was a normal boy who often trembled in mock fear of the supernatural. Because for all my aunt said, for all Emily's kiss, I was not deceived. I knew that I had seen her in the snow as the iron cut into my leg, like any other boy. I expected ghost stories at Christmas. That was the time for them. What I had not expected and now feared was, such things should actually become real. Could come out of some secret place and threaten every thread of normal life. I was convinced as I sipped the cocoa Emily had brought me. But for a moment in the snow out there, I attached the rim of another hidden world, which had nothing to do with such things as school life, holidays, friendship. I was beginning to see in a very immature way that there were other realities beneath the life I lived. So unthinkingly, I hardly heard my aunt say when she came to visit me again, "You know what, Nicky? The snow isn't going to last long. I'm so sorry the wind has changed back to the south, far from missing any festivities. I became what my uncle, in his ponderous way, called the center of interest. Even went so far as to suggest that I was a bit of a hero. And David himself was almost but not quite put in the shade, as I fell asleep the night before. When my aunt left me with her weather predictions, the house was full of noise. I heard my uncle go to the front door and invite inside the company of waits, who were doing their best with Noel. David told me that his father had brewed a special bowl of punch for them. 2 female cousins had arrived, and already a dance for New Year's Eve was being talked about in the excitement of presents. The Christmas tree, the huge turkey which my uncle carved with so much skill. I forgot what had happened 2 days ago, when Emily and the other maids were ushered in by Mrs. Horsley to drink the health of the company. I no longer worried about what I had thought I had seen. Time, as always on Christmas Day when I was young, passed so swiftly that I hardly noticed it. Almost before I realized it, my aunt was ordering me back to bed. My uncle and David carried me upstairs. I fell asleep at once. It shows what a normal kind of boy I was, for it never occurred to me that I should have any further bad dreams. When I woke, I lay for some minutes listening. Something was beating against the window panes. I was conscious, too, something was missing. And yet at the same time, I was filled with an amazing, overwhelming happiness. I looked at the chest of drawers, where the presents I had been given was spread out like a shop window. But the explanation of my happiness was not there. It was some greater miracle. I got up, and with great care put my injured leg to the floor. I could walk haltingly, clutching the edge of the table. I drew myself to the window. I caught my breath at the sight which met my eyes. Fall magically, it seemed the snow had disappeared, and the noise I had heard was rain. A warm wind was blowing everything. Stables, the church, the chimney pots of the cottages, the trees themselves were clearly outlined under the dawn light. My aunt had been right. As if someone had pulled off a white dust sheet from a room full of furniture. The countryside again visible now. There was nowhere for anything to lurk, no spots or obscured by snow. That it could hold a threat once again, the world was familiar and safe. I pulled open the window and leaned out into the warm rain, which you sometimes get in late December. I watched a kernel of smoke rise. From a cottage chimney, someone had lighted a fire Christmas. When nothing really bad could happen, had even defeated the snow itself by the middle of January. I was back in Cornwall. I spent the next 2 Christmases with my parents, who had returned from the States. In fact, one Christmas day it was so warm that I bathed in Tranian Bay just below our house. I hardly remembered the contrast from the Christmas of 1922. Now, it was a summer term of 1924. I was beginning to enjoy school and had recently been made a prefect, probably as I was 17, and already thinking of following David to Oxford. Not before time, I think it was a Thursday in the middle of July, when Thompson, the head of my house, and a great friend called out to me as we passed in the long study corridor, "See your uncles?" "Got his name in the telegraph?" "What do you mean?" "Well," he laughed and walked on. "Seems he's been killing off his maids." I ran to the papers, which were always laid out on the table in the common room. There it was on the front page. I recognized the picture at once. I'd seen it before, though. Then snow covered that particular field, and although the photograph did not show much of her face, I knew at once it was Emily. I recognized as some address she was wearing as she lay beside the gate. In death, she was that small, well-begone figure I had seen in the snow over 2 years ago. The body of Emily Simpson. I read, unable to repress my shivering, holding onto the table tightly, so vivid, with the pictures of what I had once seen in the snow. A maidservant in the household of Sir Thomas. May the financier was found at about 11 o'clock yesterday morning, beside a gate at Aleck's farm, owned by Sir Thomas, by his tenant, Mr. James Andrews' farmhand, assumed to be her lover, has been arrested and charged with her murder. The police are anxious to interview a boy of about 15, who Mr. Andrews says ran off as he approached the body of the girl. Music. If you like that story, consider supporting me as a patron. That way you help me make more stories for you and get access to a patrons-only library of stories. Lots more hours for you to listen to. So that was A Fall of Snow by James Turner, published in Staircase to the Sea in 1974. James Ernest Turner was born in Footscray in Kent in 1909. After attending the University of Oxford, he trained as a gardener and in 1947 leased a piece of land in Norfolk to work as the land in question was the site of the former Bali Rectory, dubbed to the most haunted house in England and the location of multiple reported ghost sightings and instances of poltergeist activity whilst living there. Turner and his wife Lucy, several unexplained phenomena, and Turner was involved in excavations at the site of Bali Church, which uncovered bones buried under the altar. Turner had some success in the early 1940s as a poet and published a number of novels throughout the 60s. He also wrote a book about barley and edited the fourth ghost book, part of a series established by Lady Cynthia Asquith in the 1920s. The Fall of Snow was published in his short story collection, Staircase to the Sea, the year before his 75. Despite his publication long after the golden age of the ghost story in the late 19th and early 20th century, it has a feel of this earlier time and is extremely effective. And who wrote that was Tanya Kirk, the Tanya Kirk. Write that well because Tanya Kirk edited this collection called Sunless Solstice, Strange Christmas Tales for the Longest Nights, and you may not know. But you may know that the British Library has been, of tales of the weird, nice little paperbacks. And I think I said this in the previous thing. They are finding all these stories they have in their collection and putting them together, some undiscovered or forgotten, and in some cases quite well in this collection rather. And so it's pretty good. They're lovely set and they're sort of very collectible. So, and the $8.99, I got them for $99. And what happens is I go to Grassmere on a Monday, and I usually to Sam Reed's bookshop there. And I don't need any more books because I have piles of them. But they have these collections, and I just get a few because you never know. They could go out of print, couldn't I? And this is always my big worry with books that justifies me buying them. One wonders, doesn't one? So she did. Tanya Kirk has been editing, and she isn't the only one, Lucy Evans, and they are curators in the Printed Heritage Collections team at the British Library. And it says, I'm only with 18th and 19th century books and curated the children's literature exhibition, Marvelous and Mischievous. Tanya's lead curator for the period, 1601-1900, she co-curated the exhibition, Terror and Wonder, the Gothic Imagination, and has edited Election Spirit of the Season and Chill Tidings. Now, I don't think I've got this one chill. Tidings, I'm not sure I've got Spirits of the Season, so I must go out and buy it. And this, Sunless Solstice, I've got Chill Tidings as well, so there we are now. The introduction makes me spark off loads of things. It reminded me of Raymond Briggs' The Snowman, particularly the animated version. Which, of course, I don't know if you still watch it at Christmas, but I particularly like the 1980s and 80s. David Bowie going up to the loft of that and the attic of that old house and finding his scarfy snowman scarf. Bowie was really good. We went to a David Bowie tribute band. We've seen 2 David Bowie tribute bands recently, and they didn't play any of his latest stuff from Lazarus and Dark Star, but they still had loads of the great, great good ones. So that was a lot of fun. Sadly missed Mr. Bowie, Rem Briggs, too. Passed away this year. He's a grumpy old fella, wasn't he? But that is utterly magical. And there are certain traditions I like to keep to. One is watching the BBC version of The Box of Delights by John Masefield. You remember I started to do The Midnight Folk by John Masefield, but of interest, accounting for taste, but yeah, I'll probably watch that. And what else I listen to? I have a collection of Christmas carols and stories sung by the Albion Band. And there's also Mike Oldfield's On Horseback, which isn't particularly Christmas to me and my kids. We listen to that, so they're all these Christmas traditions. I miss the days when the girls were young when we used to. That should Christmas have a Harry Potter to go out. I never read any of the books, but I used to like the movies, particularly when I went with my kids, because they were delighted by them for Christmas. By the time you hear this, it will be in December. It's a back end of November now. And rainy, and of course, certainly where I live on the west coast of the main island of Britain. It's primarily not even that cold, really. I mean, it is pretty chilly, but it doesn't freeze that often. In fact, much less than it used to, I remember. But perhaps I'm remembering when I lived in other parts of the country. Because when I lived in mid-Wales, which was pretty much in the center of the island, and even London taste, and places like Edinburgh and Hexham, where I've spent time very cold on the east side. But on the west side, wet and warm, usually so rarely do we get. And I've lived a lot of my life by the sea. So rarely do I get a Christmas, crisp. Christmassy Christmas with snow. But there we are. But maybe this year, but maybe not. Who knows, but you never know, dear. The other thing, this is set in Suffolk, and I have a story to say about Suffolk. You may know I'm actually doing another website and all about so-called true hauntings, and I haven't written anything about Barley, which is in Essex, although I visited the Bali side when I used to do my ghost tours, and also I stayed a couple of times at the Crown in Bilderston in Suffolk, which is a pub, I remember maybe said this on the podcast because I've done so. I've got like 200 plus episodes, so I'm about to repeat myself, particularly as I'm getting on in years, because that's what happens. Of course, you repeat yourself. Or maybe it's just me, but anyway. So the Crown at Bilderston. Open, it was red hot. It was June, it was really, really hot, and I stayed in one of the rooms, and I'd gone to bed, I was tired. We'd been round around having ghost tours and stuff, and historical this, that, and the other very pretty villages around that part of the world. It was all that's in lavender and all sorts of stuff. It's famous for. It's lavender, to be honest, anyway. The Crown of Bilderston, so I woke in the middle of the night, and I remember thinking, oh, this is freezing, but didn't associate it with anything. Supernatural. Curled round fully duvet around myself, went back to sleep in the morning. It was warm again because it was stifling, so it had been stifling hot all that time, and in the middle of the night it had dropped down to a very cold level. So just lots of ghosts in Suffolk, so... yeah, come and join me for my ghost tour. Anyway, there we are. I was reading that from a print copy, of course, so... You may have caught some of the rustling of the pages. The other noises you may have caught are, I should say, where I record this in our house. Would hear I'm up at the top on the 3rd floor. There are dormer windows of when we come, Velux windows in the roof space, so it isn't dark. But it's not insulated, so in the summer it's boiling hot up here, and I have to sit and record RSS. I don't know, you probably don't want that image in your head, but yeah, it's true. Then in the winter now I'm freezing cold, so I go down after a day up here, and I'm kind of shivering. But because it's not insulated. There's a scrap yard, you know, where they get metal and they grind it up. So during the day, the scrap man is at work, and that stops me. You may sometimes catchy scrap metal work in the background, and then on the weekend, which it is now, it's a Saturday. There's a football pitch ER to you, so, well, let's say to you, to the American people who are listening, but to everybody else is football, so yeah. And they get very excited to make a noise, so you may hear that. And then, of course, when it rains, I do some kind of collection playing noises, and I put them in from recordings. But these are real rain noises, and so you may kind of I think I'm doing a long, a Christmas story. I'm doing The Chimes by Dickens, which is quite a long story. Not as long as A Christmas Carol, which I've obviously done. It's another of his Christmas stories. They're probably not as good, to be fair, but it's quite political, actually. But it started to rain in the middle of that, and I thought, oh no, I've got to stop, but it's really long now. I'm doing that as a commission for Cosimo Medici. He knows who he is, and I still not sure I'm Michelangelo. But, Cosimo, thank you for the commission, so that's going to come out Eat the Christmas Day at Christmas Eve. I've done one of my own Christmas stories. We're doing a live Christmas story, Christmas ghost stories. This is a Christmas ghost story I've done, and I have a particular formula for Christmas ghost stories, which is I can write some. I try and write some pretty horrific stories. Sometimes they're scary. But this one, my Christmas bit, whimsical, because to me Christmas is not a time for terror. Me James may disagree, and we should take his advice, but I don't. So, it's a term for nice things. So this is a very whimsical. I've got a short one called The Piano, which I did last year, which I don't think are broadcast on the podcast. And this one's going to be called The Ghost of Christmas Past, or possibly The Ghost of Christmas is Past, because I'm getting together a new collection, slow but surely, which will come out as a book. I don't know what else I've got to tell you. There'd probably be something when I finish this. Anyway, I hope you're all well. And I hope, I particularly like this part of the winter. There's not much of the year. I like when the snowdrops come back in at the end of January. And then we get the crocuses in February. Now watch the spring flowers, the daffodils, and the celandine in the woods as the year wakes up again. I love that. I love spring, May time, autumn, which we had a funny autumn this year. Some days were winter, and then the next day was autumn, and that was lovely. And then I love this build up to the turn of to the solstice and the new year. And I love and just the feeling of it. But then it goes very grim in January and February, but let's not dwell on that, because we've got a lot of nice things to look forward to. I hope you have to. Yeah, so I've bought a Craig McGee, so I bought a Rhoda Procaster that the voice went off because I was looking at it, which is a kind of a very super-duper-duperish interface. Not the best, but it's better than what I had. The only problem was I'm struggling at an old DBX strip, which is bigger and old-fashioned, but it had a good noise gate on it, and I thought that this Rode Procaster would have a better one, so. But I can hear the gate opening and closing, and you maybe can too. Still not sure about the settings of that. I hope it doesn't mean I spent more money to end up in a worse position. But that wouldn't be the first time in my life I'd done that. So, anyway, beautiful, love. Hope you're all well. Yeah, just enjoy yourselves. That's my call to action. You stay happy, okay? And I'll speak to you soon.